Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're going to be exploring, I guess you could say, reimagining healing, not just like, going to the doctor, but the kind that thrives on joy, connection, and this interesting concept called mental fitness.
Okay.
Our source material is a YouTube conversation from the Better Together series,
Right.
and it's hosted by Carlos, and he's talking to Gwen Schrank, the CEO and co-founder of Shrink's Clubhouse,
Mhm.
and G.R. Zuniga, who is the director of operations for Operation Sickcare. So are you ready to rethink what healing can look like?
Absolutely. I think this idea of reimagining healing is so important because it really does acknowledge that there's no one-size-fits-all approach. I mean, what works for one person might not work for another, and that's okay.
Right. And both of these organizations that we're diving into today really exemplify that. So let's start with Shrink's Clubhouse. The thing that really stuck out to me was that they operate out of a former jail,
Wow.
which is not your typical mental health setting. So what are your thoughts on that? What do you think about that choice of location?
I think it's incredibly powerful. It's almost like they're saying we're going to take this place of confinement and turn it into a space of liberation. It makes you think about the ways we can break free from things that are holding us back, whether it's physical spaces or past traumas or even those limiting beliefs we carry around.
It makes you think about those internal walls we build up, too.
Exactly.
And it sounds like Gwen's approach to healing is all about finding what, I guess, sparks joy for each person.
Absolutely. She actually says in the interview, we asked them, what did you love to do as a kid? What lights you up? And how can we help you reconnect with that? So it's about tapping into those passions and using them as tools for healing.
So it's really shifting the focus from what's wrong to what's right, what's possible.
Exactly. Recognizing that everyone has strengths and resilience.
Yeah.
And you can use that to your power for healing.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so let's move on to Operation Sickcare now. This organization was founded by Doc Ziggy, who's a veteran, and he's really dedicated to supporting other veterans and their caregivers. Their motto is "Live Unbroken,"
Hmm.
which is so powerful. And I think G.R. Zuniga, who's the director of operations, brings such a unique perspective because he's also Doc Ziggy's full-time caregiver.
Wow.
Yeah, and he talks about in the interview how this experience has been transformative for him, not just professionally, but personally.
Right. I mean, to be able to see that firsthand and understand the challenges and the triumphs of being a caregiver, I think is pretty incredible.
Absolutely. And there's this great anecdote about Doc Ziggy customizing his walker to match his beloved truck.
Oh, wow.
So what do you think that says about their approach to healing?
I think it speaks volumes. Instead of viewing his walker as a symbol of limitation, he turned it into an expression of his personality, made it his own.
It's like he's saying, hey, I'm not defined by this walker. I'm still me.
Right. And it's just a good reminder that we can always reclaim our agency
Yeah.
and redefine our relationship with challenges.
Yeah, absolutely. So both Shrink's Clubhouse and Operation Sick Care are really challenging, I think, the traditional view of what healing is. It's not just about therapy sessions. It's about finding those sparks of joy and connection in everyday life.
And both Gwen and GR talk about meeting people where they are and acknowledging the power of choice and control in that healing process.
Yeah, that's a really intriguing concept.
It is.
It makes me think about how important it is to have an environment for healing that feels empowering,
Yes.
rather than like clinical and sterile.
Exactly. And both of these organizations seem to have that.
Yeah, Shrink's Clubhouse, transforming the jail, and Operation Sick Care, having those shared experiences, building community, they both really seem to get that, healing is not a solo mission.
Yeah.
It's about connection and being vulnerable, finding your tribe.
Mm-hmm.
But I want to dive a little bit deeper into that idea of meeting people where they are, because it's so central to how both of these organizations approach this.
Okay.
It's not about forcing people into some predetermined box,
Right.
acknowledging that everyone's journey is unique. In the interview, Gwen talks about the need to step outside of, the traditional therapy setting and go to where people are already gathering, like a coffee shop or a park or even a sporting event.
I like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's recognizing that healing doesn't have to happen in a formal setting. It can happen anywhere as long as people feel safe and supported.
And it sounds like Operation Sick Care really uses those shared experiences,
Yeah.
especially sporting events,
Mm-hmm.
to help veterans and their caregivers connect with each other and build those supportive relationships.
GR talks about how these events create like a sense of camaraderie and shared purpose.
Okay.
And it also provides a space for people to be vulnerable and support each other through, difficult times.
It's about making it okay to not be okay.
Exactly.
Yeah, because so often, especially with mental health challenges, there's a sense of isolation and shame.
Right.
But when you're surrounded by people who understand what you're going through,
Yeah.
it can make all the difference.
It can be so empowering to realize that you're not alone.
hmm Okay, I want to shift gears a bit and talk about this idea of mental fitness,
Okay.
which both Gwen and GR talk about in the conversation.
It's a great concept, I think.
Yeah.
It helps to destigmatize mental health, by framing it as something we can all work on actively,
Yeah.
just like we do with our physical health.
Yeah, I love that comparison because we all know that we need to exercise and eat well to stay physically healthy, but we often neglect our mental well-being.
We do.
And I think mental fitness gives us a tangible way to approach it.
Exactly. And just like with physical fitness, it requires practice and consistency.
So what does it actually look like, though?
Yeah.
I think a lot of people might hear that and be like, okay, but what do I do?
Right. Well, I think Gwen and GR both provide some really good insight.
Okay.
Gwen talks about it encompassing self-awareness and self-care
Okay.
and creating like a ripple effect of positive change.
And I love that she highlights the ripple effect because it reminds us that our mental well-being isn't just about us, it's about the people around us, too.
Exactly. And I think GR's story about meditation is a great example of this.
Right.
He initially approached it with a lot of skepticism,
Oh, really?
but he discovered how profoundly it impacted him, both mentally and physically.
So he went from skeptic to advocate.
Yeah.
That's quite the transformation.
It is.
And it's so inspiring because it shows that, even if you're doubtful at first, give these practices a try. You never know how they might benefit you.
Right.
His story also highlights this fascinating connection between mental and physical health. And we heard a little bit about this with Gwen's experience, too. It seems like we can't really separate the two, can we?
We can't. In the interview, Gwen actually shares that her physical symptoms were masking an underlying mental health condition. It wasn't until she started to address her mental well-being that her physical health began to improve.
Makes you wonder how many people are experiencing physical symptoms that, actually have a root cause in their mental health.
Right. It's important to look at healing holistically.
It is. And GR's story adds another layer to this.
Yeah.
He shares this anecdote about how his chronic knee pain completely vanished after he started meditating regularly. Wait, really?
That's what he says in the interview.
Wow, so it just disappeared.
Yeah. It's incredible.
It's amazing how our thoughts and emotions can impact our physical well-being.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people would be resistant to that idea.
Yeah, there's definitely still a lot of skepticism, especially in Western medicine, which tends to compartmentalize the mind and body.
Right.
But I think stories like his are starting to challenge those notions. It's important to be open to those challenges and, consider that healing can take many forms.
Sometimes the most unexpected approaches are the most effective. And speaking of unexpected approaches, I was really struck by the conversation about language and how it can impact our understanding of mental health.
Okay.
Both Gwen and GR talk about the need to move away from potentially stigmatizing terminology.
It's a crucial conversation. The words we use can have such a big impact on how we perceive and experience these challenges. For example, they talked about moving away from terms like commit suicide and using language like died by suicide instead.
Yeah, that's a subtle shift, but I see how it could make a big difference.
It does. The first phrase implies a criminal act, which adds to the shame and stigma. The second phrase simply states the cause of death without judgment.
Right.
It's a lot more humanizing.
It's recognizing that this is a health issue, not a moral failing.
Right.
And I think it's a great example of how we can use language to create a more compassionate and supportive environment.
Absolutely.
That reminds me of the name of the series this came from, Better Together. I feel like that title really encapsulates what Schrank's Clubhouse and Operation Sickcare are all about.
It does. It's about recognizing that we're not meant to go through these challenges alone. We need each other.
And the Better Together series gives us a platform for those conversations.
Yes.
It lets people share their stories, their struggles, and their triumphs and connect with others. Hearing those stories can be incredibly healing in itself.
It reminds us that we're not alone.
Yeah.
Everyone has a story and everyone has something to offer. And when we share them, we create that space for healing and growth.
It's about recognizing that power of shared experience,
Exactly.
moving away from isolation and towards connection.
That's a really powerful message, especially right now when things feel so divided.
Yeah, it is. So what resonates most with you from all of this?
Hmm, that's a good question. I think what stands out to me is this idea that healing can be found in the most unexpected places,
Yeah.
whether it's transforming a former jail into a space of hope or finding community at a sporting event. Both Shrink's Clubhouse and Operation Sickcare show us that healing is not limited to a therapist's office.
It's about expanding our definition of what it can look like.
Exactly.
And it's about recognizing the power of those small moments of joy and connection.
Absolutely. It's about finding those sparks of light,
Yeah.
even in the darkest times, and letting them guide us towards a better version of ourselves.
So for our listener, what are some key takeaways they can apply to their own life? Even if they're not directly involved with a veteran community or haven't experienced a mental health crisis.
I think there's a lot here for everyone. For starters, this idea of mental fitness is something we can all embrace.
Hmm.
Just like we make time for physical exercise, we can make time for things that nourish our mental well-being, whether that's meditation, spending time in nature, or just taking a few minutes to practice gratitude.
Yeah, it's about being proactive.
Exactly.
And the emphasis on community and connection is another one.
Yeah.
We're not meant to do life alone.
No, we're not.
And having a strong support system makes such a difference.
It does.
I think sometimes we forget that. We try to be strong and independent, but we all need help sometimes.
We do.
And there's no shame in asking for it.
The stories we've explored today highlight the power of that vulnerability and connection.
It's about recognizing that our shared humanity is bigger than our differences.
Mm,
And when we come together and support each other, healing is possible.
it is.
It really is powerful stuff. And I think we've only just scratched the surface here.
Yeah, I think so too.
But before we go, I want to leave our listener with something to ponder.
Okay. I like it.
If healing could look like anything you wanted it to, what would that look like? What would it feel like? Where would it take place?
That's such a great question. I think for me, it would feel like a sense of deep inner peace and a connection to something bigger than myself.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it takes place surrounded by nature, or maybe it's just a quiet moment of stillness.
I love that.
Yeah.
For me, I think it would feel like freedom. Freedom from the past, freedom from those limiting beliefs,
Mm,
and the freedom to just embrace all that life has to offer.
beautiful.
Well, thanks for diving deep with us today.
Of course.
Until next time, keep exploring. And remember, healing is possible.
And you're not alone in the journey.